Welcome everybody to our regular meeting of Council. At the start of every meeting we acknowledge that we're on the traditional lands of the territories of the Coast and Strait Salish peoples. Specifically, we recognize the Tlikwaynung speaking people, and known today as the Songhees and the Esquimalt, and that their historic connections, which has been here for thousands of years, as we discussed earlier today with a student group, their historic connections continue to this day. So there is video for anyone coming up to speak. You will be videoed. These videos are archived for if anyone wants to watch them later. So I call the meeting to order. I might say in terms of our agenda, we were to have a presentation, but as a result of a family issue, that we'll adjourn that and put that over another time. I also note that Councillor Zelka is on medical leave, and Councillor Ney is away on business. So with that, we start the agenda. And we have item number 1, which is our council meeting minutes of the 23rd of October. Move for approval. Moved.
Second.
And seconded. Any discussions, changes, deletions, additions? Seeing none, I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Yes. Well, apparently my computer is having trouble with the connection. I'm not quite sure what happened. I think I pressed the wrong button too many times. Siri, I think it was Ms. Siri was kind of butting in on me. All right, so my remarks is the item number 2 on the agenda. I have quite a number of remarks because a lot of things have been happening. This is the last couple of days, of course, has been very emotional for a lot of people. I attended 2 special ceremonies on your behalf and with you in some instances. I went to the synagogue, the Emmanuel Synagogue congregation downtown on the 9th of November, and there they were remembering the past and envisioning the future. It was Kristallnacht. Which was the start of the Holocaust in essence, when many Jews in Europe in 1938 on the 9th of November were rounded up and imprisoned, and that really started the Nazi reign of terror. I was there with the Premier. I'm very honored to be in his presence, and we, the Premier, and there was a minister of the Crown Minister there too. We were all asked to take a pledge, and I'm going to read that to you because I think it is important that we think about these things and to avoid anything like this ever happening again. And it's frightening what's happening in other countries, such as Myanmar seems to be repeating something along these lines. The pledge that we took in front of the congregation was as follows. Silence in the face of injustice is to agree with the ones who perpetrate injustices. Never will we stand by to allow expressions of racism, xenophobia, or discrimination against any peoples in our community. We will do our utmost to encourage meaningful dialogue and positive actions to foster understanding amongst diverse groups based on mutual respect. Very important pledge, and one I think I've mentioned on earlier occasions, but one that we need to continually remind ourselves. We do see the rise of xenophobia and racism in many countries throughout the world, and it's a frightening thought that what that could lead to. The other emotional event was Remembrance Day at the Cenotaph. We had an incredible turnout for people who were there to pay their respects to the fallen war heroes and to those who served. We had a wreath-laying ceremony, So wanted to recognize the police and the fire departments who did an exceptional job in organizing this. We had an excellent sound system. We had an excellent process, and so many people laid wreaths. And really, the park, I must admit, was in incredible shape. We'd spent nearly 2 weeks, our staff there, the Parks Department, and we're grateful to them for that. And it really makes us all proud as members of council to be present at a location like that with the solemnity that was involved. And it was also a first, and I think a very important first, and that was, this was the first time that a First Nations person had been involved in the ceremony in the way she was. A counselor from Songhees came and spoke from the heart and during the reflections, and really touched a lot of people, and we were certainly grateful for that. And that's something that will continue as part of our commitment to reconciliation, and as part of our commitment to building bridges with the First Nations. So it was a very special occasion. The Scouts were there, the Girl Guides were there, and it really was a community event, and it really said that we care as a community. So grateful to everyone who attended, and of course everyone who contributed. I also want to recognize on that very same day, at almost the same hour, there was a cry for help. A cry for help was a man who was clinging desperately to a boat. According to news reports, he'd been there for nearly 25 minutes in the frigid waters, and he's happy to be alive, no doubt. He's lucky to be alive. Someone heard his cries. Police took immediate action and essentially commandeered, with the consent of another boat owner, and they went out and they rescued the person. And I want to recognize Constable Brett Stewart, who was the one in the boat who saved this man's life, and Eric Payne, who attended with him, and he was the watcher, essentially, because sometimes you can lose sight of a person in the water, and once you do that, it's a real problem. Once they got the man back to the shore, I understand first aid was there with the ambulance was waiting. So we're grateful for the quick actions of our police and emergency workers. So thank you very much for that. A bit of news on the, I just have a minute here. Okay, 3. Yes, I also want to recognize other members of our staff, and that is the manager and the group that looks after Oak Bay Emergency Program. And recently they held a seminar here, Emergency Operations Center Essentials. Really, again, shows that our staff are committed to ensuring that we're all trained, we're all ready in the case of a very significant a disturbance or earthquake or a flood or anything of that nature. So it was held right here in Chambers, and I'm grateful to Eileen Grant, who's the manager of Oak Bay Emergency Programs, for organizing that, and for the staff who attended. It was a 2-day course, and so we had quite a number of people attending. I received accolades from the Office of the Superintendent of the School Board. You may know that a lot of portables are being built, and we got a very nice letter. I think it was sent to our Chief Administrative Officer, saying and lauding our planning staff, Ms. Jensen, Acting Director, and it said, "We very much appreciate the ease to which it has been to work with your staff and our district under tight timelines to deliver quality learning spaces for students." And I was taken aside when I ran into I think it was Secretary Treasurer, I think is his title, and he reiterated how grateful the school board was for how fast our staff acted, so our kids could be in the portables. I also want to recognize and thank the people who, Parks Department and the volunteers who put Tree Appreciation Day together. We planted 8 large Gary Oaks, probably about 40 or 50 camas, a variety of native plants, all with the help of some Girl Guides, volunteers, friends of Uplands Park. We had the leader there, Margaret Litke, as well as staff member Chris Hyde-Lay working there, and did a marvelous job, and it was absolutely great. So I want to thank those involved, and there was a lot of volunteers that came out and pulled it together. All right, C, D. And on the thanking thing, I biked one day and I rode another day to the Oak Bay Artist Studio Tour. Fabulous tour. And we have incredible artists here. This was put together by our staff, Parks and Recreation and Culture. They helped put together the brochure, and the local artists working together. So it was a real community effort, well attended, and absolutely wonderful art. So that's a lot of thank yous, and to a lot of people. But it does also show the vibrancy of our community and how active we are on so many fronts. I just wanted to advise you, not unfortunately, that our attempts to add Royal to the Victoria Golf Club has unfortunately been turned down by Her Majesty. We got a letter very recently from Private Secretary to Lieutenant Governor advising us of the news, and that we certainly did everything we could, but right now the apparently Rideau Hall, who connects to the Queen, and they were in direct contact with Buckingham Palace and made similar requests, but we've not been successful. So it's not the Royal Victoria Golf Club, except in our hearts, not in name. We received a thank you from a young person who is recipient of our Saanich and Oak Bay Centennial Scholarships. And Ms. Koa Jacks was the winner of that, and she wrote an absolutely wonderful letter we received about a week ago, saying how grateful she was, how much it's contributed to her education, and how it's allowed her to further her dream to attend optometry school after she's graduated from University of Victoria. And so the amount of money I can save for my education is infinitely precious, and because of that, I thank you again for your generous contribution. So our scholarship that was started in, I was going to say 1906, but 2006, on our 100th anniversary, was warmly received, and a very grateful student, and we wish her well. Then a couple of events to remind you of, again on the theme of how wonderful and vibrant our community is, and that has to do with the Heritage lecture that's going on Wednesday night, Coming Home, Architects, Design, and the First World War. Kate Humble will be the speaker, and if you haven't heard her, she's an absolute treat she goes through. And then there's a benefit concert. Benefit concert to salute to the saloon singers, and this is to support another wonderful Snowyeth Legacy Scholarships that will allow Indigenous students to go further in their education. So this is money being raised by the Rotary Foundation for that. So it is the 23rd of November, and you can get your tickets in a number of different spots available, McPherson Box Office and Recreation Oak Bay at the high school also, and Scotiabank here in Oak Bay. So it's an evening 7:30 performance. Joe Coughlin, one of Canada's great jazz singers, are there. He's had a couple, it'll be at the high school at the Dave Dunnett Theatre, and I urge you all to support that. I think many of us from council will be out there. And then just a final word, because I see a young student here from Selkirk Montessori. Give us a wave. There you are. Thank you very much. 2 classes from Selkirk Montessori were here today for an hour and a half each, 1 hour and a half in the morning, 1 hour and a half in the afternoon. Grades 3 and 4 were here. about 30 in each time, and we toured them around there's a short tour because it's a small place, but we toured them around Municipal Hall and told them about governance and what we do up here, and they each had, some of them had a turn to be councillors and mayors and staff, and we went through a budget exercise. Very interesting. This morning's class ran out of money before they funded all of the services, but the afternoon class raised taxes by 15% to meet their budget. Much to the chagrin of the parents who are sitting at the back going, "What?" But it was a wonderful lesson, and I asked both classes at the end, and what did you learn from it? And many people said that local government and governance is really hard. And of course, we don't have to be told that when we sit up here. It's not easy, but we do our very best, and as did the students. So it was a great fun. So take my thanks back to your school and the two classes, the orcas and the owls. Thank you. All right. This just in. Yes, you're right. I did. In all of my many, I think it's the longest I've ever gone on for there. There is one thing I've left out, and I apologize because I didn't have the sheet in front of me, and that's Chief Cockle's recent award, where he was recognized in the emergency preparedness field for his contribution, and it was I think there was a write-up in the newspaper. I certainly tweeted it out, and this is a good opportunity where we have the chief with us to thank him personally. You richly deserved award, Chief, and thanks for all you do and keeping us safe and keeping our future safe. So thank you very much. Let's a round of applause for the Chief. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. All right, so we next go on to item number 4, the public participation period. So we have 20 minutes that we set aside at every council meeting, and we allow people to come to the microphone to speak to us for up to 3 minutes on a topic of their choosing that has an impact on Oak Bay. And so we would ask, if you come to the microphone, we'd like to have your name, the municipality where you live, and then there's a little form there we'd like you to fill in so we can get the correct spelling of your name. And you have 3 minutes. I time it, and I time it from the point of view that I give you a hearty welcome, and then I turn the 3 minutes on, and there's a dulcet tone that tells you when your 3 minutes are up, and when you hear that, please just finish your sentence or the paragraph, and I'm just going to set this up here. And we appreciate anyone who comes forward. So, and you are being recorded, by the way, so you're going to have to be close to the microphone, otherwise people watching at home or watching on repeats will not hear you. So, does anyone wish to address us? Does anyone wish to address us? Yes. Thank you.
Anthony Mears, South Oak Bay. I got this
Mr.
agenda
Mears.
item late. I wondered, did you want to welcome me? Or
I just did. I just
oh,
said
sorry, I
welcome,
didn't
Mr.
hear
Mayor.
that.
Sorry.
Right.
I think I talked over
No,
you.
we were talking.
Why don't we start the clock again, because you just lost 10 seconds.
Actually, you owe me 30 seconds, but
Yes,
I'm going to be
no,
brief
10.
tonight, so you don't have to pile that on.
Welcome, Mr. Mears.
Thank
There
you.
go.
Okay, I want to address the approved item number 7, the regional district sewer cost recovery allocation charges. I got this really late, so I'm going to have to wing this, and I've got a lot of points to make. I'm quite surprised to see it pop up again. Well, I shouldn't be, because it was a pretty close 6-1 vote. And I noticed that the one dissenter has brought it back for reconsideration. So a lot of people will benefit from this. I mean, we've had a spike in deferments. We've got families and children that can defer. We've had old age pensioners. We have people with disability on limited incomes. So we've got a number of people that would benefit. So I know Councillor Croft was concerned, which is good, that this would get deferred if it was transferred to the property taxes. And I'd really like to say that if you want to reconsider it, given the amount of people that are involved here, and given that I don't notice that taxes ever are going down, and I know that prices are going up. I mean, I have a new goal in life, that to die before I can still afford food. So I think that it would be better in the public interest and fairness to bring it to a Cal meeting so we can get some public input on it. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mears. You have plenty of time left over. Anyone else wish to address us? Okay, I asked for last time. Anyone else wish to address us? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Mears, and I'll address that issue when we deal with number 7. Okay, on the agenda. Thank you very much. Grant opportunities through Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. This is a report by Chief Cockle, and there is a proposal that's being recommended. And Chief Cockle, you just want to give us a very high level view of what this is about and what you're requesting.
Thank you, Your Worship. So what we're requesting here tonight is a resolution from Council for the authority to submit the application to the Union of BC municipalities in order for us to purchase some accessible storage for our emergency social services and emergency operations center equipment, as well as some training and exercise money that's available through grants. This granting process is part of the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, which was announced by the provincial government last April in the amount of approximately $80 million from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. The interesting part about these grants is that there isn't any funding from the municipality that has to come forth. They're not matching grants. They're simply an application. You put the application in if you have council support to do so, and then they just say yes or no as to whether you can actually put the funding forward. In our case, the reason that we're bringing this forward is it's an opportunity for us to kind of pull all of our emergency program EOC pieces, our ESS pieces, from multiple buildings and storage nooks and crannies that we have throughout the municipality into kind of a centralized area. It'll be done probably in the form of a CCAN or a trailer event, and so that's what this proposal is for.
Any questions for the Fire Chief? Go ahead, Councillor Murdoch, please.
I think the Chief actually answered it, but the question was really, I mean, that seems pretty obviously supportive of operational need and council direction and everything else, so why did it have to come back here for approvals as opposed to just being approved and making the application? But did you mention there that it has to have our approval for it to go through?
Yes, through the chair, Councillor Murdoch, it has to have a council resolution for them to accept our application, so that's why we're before you tonight.
I move the recommendation.
Second.
And that is to support the application. Thank you very much. Discussion? Seeing none, call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chief. Deer Management Strategy Grant Application, and this is a report by Mr. Jones, Director of Corporate Services. And as we know, we have an ongoing relationship with the UWSS. One of us has to stop speaking now. Sorry, the 3 minutes is up. Hang on. Is that my 3 minutes? That's your 3 minutes. You were under 3 minutes. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. Thank you. The Urban Wildlife Stewardship Society and Oak Bay have, on a prior occasion, applied for and received the $20,000 grant from the provincial government. Provincial government, we were recently advised in a very short timeline, had a similar program that rolled out, I think probably within the month. And we have a report as well as a proposal for another application for, I guess, what would be part 2 of the program. Mr. Jones, can you give us again a very high-level overview of what this report's about?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure I can add a lot more to that. As you did mention, this year, like last, the province has made available $100,000 to help communities look at the issue of urban deer. And last year we were successful in getting a matching grant of $20,000 in partnership with the Urban Wildlife Stewardship Society. And this report is recommending that, again, this year we apply for a matching grant of up to $20,000. And we have representatives here from the UWSS if members of council have any questions on the program itself.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have Christy Kilpatrick and Steve Huckster here on behalf of UWSS. Should we have any questions? Let's see if there are any questions. Either first for Mr. Jones and his report. Yes, go ahead, please, for Mr. Jones. Go ahead, Councillor Croft.
Through you, Chair. Mr. Jones, in the financial impact, I think the wording should be, as in 2017, staff proposed to allocate $20,000 in the 2018 budget on the last page of your report. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that we've got that correct.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, there's a little typo. Thanks for catching that. Councillor Murdoch, you had a no? Okay. So no questions for staff. Any questions for UWSS representatives? None? Oh, yes, one. Thank you very much. And who would you, I don't know who's going to be the spokesman. Mr. Huckster, I understand? Yeah. Yeah, I think you're the applicant, if you wouldn't mind coming forward. And this is Steve Huckster. And you're just tell us what your role is with UWSS.
Thank you, Your Worship and Councillors. I'm the project manager for the Urban Wildlife Stewardship Society.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Councillor Murdoch.
Thank you, through Chair, and to you, Mr. Huckster. Thanks for coming in, and thanks for putting this application together. I'm supportive of moving it forward, but I have some questions, so I'll try not to be too in here. One of which, just under the project goals, is laid out in the current version of this. There's 4 goals which all wrap around the gain information on the ecology, develop an understanding of population size, develop an evidence-based management program, provide a science-based standard. There's nothing in there about actually reducing the deer population in 2018. I'm assuming that is the goal here, is that we're going to get to the actual process of getting deer down.
That is the goal. I wouldn't be standing here if it were otherwise.
So I think it'd probably be worth, I mean, maybe not to change it this time, but that's really important, I think. We have to be actually doing something on this project. Just curious if there's any. The count's been underway. We last year, a year ago, to start the count process, and I know there's been some delays in some of the aspects of it. Do we have any early indications in terms of the deer count and so forth, or is that still an ongoing process?
It's still an ongoing process. The scientists that are helping us with this, specifically Dr. Jason Fisher of UVic, he's an expert in population assessment. And we need a certain amount of data in order to actually crunch the numbers and produce the results. And that does take time. We need at least a minimum of 3 months worth of camera trap data in order to put the mathematicians to it.
Okay. And I still have questions around funding and methodology and operations. Those are really the operational ones. But I am, it sort of ties to both operations and funding. It surprised me in this report. We had a process last time where we debated the merits, pros and cons of the application and approved it as council. Mm-hmm. That had a $40,000 budget attached to it. This budget is coming back and asking for a similar amount, but there's no report back on the money spent. There's no indication of how it was spent. In fact, there's duplicate lines that are asked for $1,500 last time for a final report, asking for it again this year, but we've given that money already. Is there any way of getting that information for us to move this forward? Because I feel, frankly, a little uncomfortable, approving more funding if we don't have a report back on how the money was spent so far.
Yeah, there should be an accounting of how the money was spent so far within council. It's within Oak Bay itself. We can certainly provide a report for you, but all the funds have been going through Oak Bay. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't something that was necessary for this application to PUDAC for this funding round. So it wasn't something that was required to be entered into this application.
Okay.
But it's information that we can supply to you for sure.
So I guess I do have a question for Mr. Jones then, since he's flagging it. Thank you.
Mr. Just on that point, maybe Mr. Jones can speak to it, because typically the province requires reporting out on any grant monies. Could you speak to that?
Your Worship, yes, we actually did report out to the province and sent them a report on progress, et cetera. So I can absolutely circulate that to council.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. And I guess I would like to separate sort of the community goal from the academic research when we're doing this portion of it, because the community goal here is to reducing the deer, but there's a lot of, in this report, and the goals that are academic in nature. They are developing models, coming up with developing vaccines and so forth that are tied to what we want to do, but they're not necessarily, direct related. So I'm just going to talk a little, ask a few questions about that. One of the things I noticed was missing in this thing was there's just no mention of community education or information. That was a key sort of cornerstone. Is that sort of felt that we're at a fairly good place right now in terms of community education?
I'm not sure if you're aware of the McCrory report that came out not long ago. It was a report that was. It's a report that focuses on 5 communities, 4 communities in the East Kootenays, and then Oak Bay, and a big part of the focus was on the Oak Bay. It was an independent review that was commissioned and has been passed on to Minister Doug Donaldson, and the ultimate statement and conclusion was that not enough research has been done on what we're dealing with. Where do we start? How do we measure success? Has there been enough community engagement? And they found that the report actually admittedly states that a lot of this should be under the purview of the provincial government, but it's been downloaded onto communities such as Oak Bay. So as far as widespread education, that's an incredibly important factor that was identified with the CRD many years ago. It's been identified by the Province of BC's conflict analysis on deer management. So we ourselves, the UWSS, that's one of our primary functions is education. We now have informationals going out through online Oak Bay News, Esquimalt News, Victoria News. So yeah, we're taking that up. The McCrory report wasn't so kind on communities such as Oak Bay that they hadn't gone far enough in their community education efforts. If you like, I have all your emails. I can forward the report to you. There's I think 24 pages specific to their discoveries of Oak Bay, and it's a very comprehensive report and was put together by Margie Paquette, who's done similar conflict analysis assessments for wildlife, human conflicts for Whistler, North Vancouver, City of Port Coquitlam, all kinds of places. So they're very experienced at doing this. It's a very comprehensive report. Interesting read. Thank you.
You touched on at one point there just the need for more information to guide these kind of pieces. So can you give us some sense of how accurate our deer count has to be to go through this process?
A lot more accurate than has been done in the past. It needs to be accurate so that we can know exactly how many animals we're targeting. We need to discover through the research what is a normal level of population of deer in a community like Oak Bay. In the past, it was very, very low, but there's a new norm now. So we have to find out what is acceptable, and a lot of that falls back to community education. We need to be able to measure success. So as we apply contraceptives, we need to do ongoing accounts of how many are in the population level. So the research that we're doing now is establishing a basis for what will be ongoing research throughout this effort to reduce population levels. And that's why it's so important. It's very, very complex. Certainly, actually, His Worship Mayor Jensen said this is a very complex project, and I actually underestimated just how complex it was. But I've learned a lot in the last couple of years, and yeah, it's very complex. Wildlife management is very complex, so we have to do some research to really get a full understanding of it.
Can I just chime in there too? I think it's really important as well to. I think it's important to note as well that it's actually the province that has held us to a really rigorous research process. So this has been mandated by the province. So when the first application went in, the province came back, and there was quite a bit of back and forthing with the application after the initial one, with the province requiring this high level of research and needing the results. So this is actually very much comes from from the province. And the other point, too, that I just wanted to slide in is in terms of public education. At this point, the funding that comes from the province does not cover public education. So all the publication that's happened to date has been under the auspices of the UWSS, working in conjunction with Hope Cape. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, thank you. Are they, a follow-up question to that then, is the province paying for all that? Are they willing to pay extra for that level of detailed scientific rigor and so forth that's being part of this? I guess part of my concern here is that this seems to be falling very heavily on us as a municipality and not on the province's side of the ledger.
Oh, we carry the same concern. Yeah, it's, they're demanding a high level of rigor for us. Just the permitting process for the animal care form that we're required in order to do the actual capturing and GPS collaring of the deer. We keep getting questions thrown at us, are you going to do this? Are you going to do this? What size of needles are you going to be using for the syringes? They're making very, very certain that this follows an incredibly strong scientific rigor. The province seems to have made a change of direction from culling. Yeah, if you'll remember, in March of 2014, Dr. Helen Schwanz was here, and the only method of population control she recommended was clover trapping and culling. And they found that it's not as effective in urban environments, and that's why they're now supporting the Cranbrook translocation project, and that's why they're supporting this project. But this is something brand new to them, and they're not really that familiar with it, so they're demanding a very high level of confidence in what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. And I would just comment on that I think there's, again, a big difference between what we need as a municipality versus what the province needs in terms of the level of accuracy. Has the collaring started yet?
No, we're still awaiting. Where we've just resubmitted the application for I think the third time, and we should hear back pretty soon. We've been trying to get the permit since April, but some of the people are out in the fields. Our scientists are out in the field, so it's been quite a process. But the end goal of this is population management and reduction. The province wouldn't be providing us any funding at all for if they didn't have some degree of confidence that this was a viable option for sure.
Fair enough. I know that's the general goal of everybody here. I'm just trying to figure out how we actually get to that point. So just maybe then clarify for me the timelines that we're talking about on the collaring and then the completed amount of counts that you feel that you can get an accurate count and so forth. Because again, I'll point out in the thing we agreed to last year, the count was going to be completed and the inoculation was going to start this year. So we're now at the end of this year, and we're now looking at summer of next year. Is that a realistic expectation that we're actually going to get to inoculating deer in 2018?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So what's the timeline required for the count and then the crunching of that data and so forth? How long will that actually take, and can you be fairly sure that you're actually going to get the collars on in time to do that modeling?
Well, we're actually going to be collecting data for about 2 years, but our intention is to start using an immunocontraception after the does have fawned and the fawns are then weaned, which will be around September of this coming year. So that is our goal, and that's what we're working towards. We will be, the research that we're doing has to be done in order to do this and be able to measure and gauge success. But our scientists have said, we don't want you immunizing any deer until we've had at least this many months worth of data that we've gathered that can't be tarnished by immunocontraception. And that target area will be next September. So that's when we can start immunocontracepting the deer.
Okay, and again, do you have a sense of how accurate that number is going to be with the 40 cameras and the 20 collars?
It'll be very accurate. Dr. Jason Fisher, he's an expert on camera trapping and population assessment. In fact, he's in the boreal forest of Alberta, northern Alberta, setting up cameras right now. And he's using techniques that are innovative and are the very latest mathematical applications that can be applied to this. So when they extrapolate the information from this camera work, and combine that with the GPS telemetry readings, that will give us a really accurate assessment. We've been in contact with a Martin Feehan, a fellow that we discovered in Fort Drum, New York, who's doing the exact same thing that we're doing and has been doing it for the past 2 years. And he's very supportive. He's given us a lot of encouragement and said that we're heading in the right direction. And as I say, we didn't know about this fellow until Dr. Fisher was at a seminar in Arizona not too long ago. But in going back and forth, we're very encouraged that the direction we're taking is accurate.
Okay, and so at that point, once we know a reasonably accurate number, the intent is to vaccinate as many deer as possible?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Okay, I think that's largely my questions. So the other ones I think are just related to the specifics of the cost that's been spent, and we can get that report separately. So I'll leave the rest of my questions at this point. Thank you very much.
But rest assured that our end goal is not, we're monitoring the science and saying, do you really need this much information? Do we really need this much information? We're on top of that because we realize that people are impatient and they want the actual population control to begin. So just wanted to assure you of that.
No, I don't doubt that, and I know that the effort here is there. My concern is that the $51,000 and change being asked for this year and the $40,000 last year combined, I think it's not unreasonable for people to want some action on this. And when so much of it is around building population models and things of that nature, we're building a model for the province in many ways here, right? We're significantly funding a lot of research on this front that really should be done by the province. And I know this was raised by Councillor Kirby last time. I think she was maybe the only person who voted against it, but with good reasons. Because this is not
Braithwaite, actually.
Councillor Braithwaite as well. But I didn't disagree with them. I think that's probably the single biggest argument against funding this is that the province should be doing this. And the farther we get down into the building of models that can be used provincially to model their population controls, it seems that we're getting farther down that path. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite, do you have questions? Let's just see if there's any questions.
Yeah, I have questions.
Yep.
Is
Question
that all right?
for staff, or yes, certainly, as opposed to discussion, because we kind of got off topic a little bit of discussion, which is a bit unusual with a member of the audience and a member of council. But I think we want to try to get to a motion at some point. Okay, but go ahead and ask as many questions as you like on this topic.
Thank you very much. Okay, so through you, Chair. So I have a couple of questions, and it's some of them have been answered already, but some of them it's really around the budget. So when I look at your budget, it's a budget of $51,500. So it's a matching grant of $20,000 that the province will put in and $20,000 that the municipality will put up. So my question would be, where does the other $11,500 come from?
Well, we'll be asking the PUDAC funding folks for an additional amount. We suspect there won't be a lot of uptake. They have $100,000 set aside, but it has never been taken fully advantage of. Okay, this year as well, Kimberley and Elkford have both said that for them, culls are no longer an option, and translocation is too new for them to use. So there's going to be other funds, and we'll talk with Jeff Morgan and PUDAC and pick that up.
So, but I'm just wanting to make sure that $11,500 won't fall back on the municipality.
No,
Okay.
no, not at all.
So then my next question, if I may, around the budget is that you also have $20,000 for product development in the budget, but if you use Zonostat, won't those development costs be nil? Is that not how I read the report?
The Zonostat D?
Yeah, the Zonostat D.
Yeah, the Zonostat D is a 1-year efficacy drug.
Right.
The product development would be for a drug that would last 6 to 7 years.
Okay.
So the Zonostat D, if you're using that, you have to inoculate the animals each and every year.
Right.
So it seems cheaper in the short term, but if we spend the money to develop a long-term efficacy vaccine that will last for 6 to 7 years, it becomes much more cost-effective in the long term by a long shot.
Okay, so there's two line items in the budget that perhaps I'm mixing them up, because one is product development research, actually 3 line items, and the other one is a PZP and adjuvant, which is $6,000, and then the manufacturing of the initial 50 doses for $5,000. So
and that's all part of the product development, as
right.
the actual product development of the vaccine. Also, the product trials are involved in that as well.
Okay. So my next question would be that I think I heard you say that you wouldn't be inoculating any deer until the fall of 2018. So in essence, the effect of those inoculations will not be seen until the spring of 2019, correct?
Yeah, our camera traps and everything will be able to tell us to make sure those animals are not inoculated
Yeah, so
or have been inoculated and
Yeah.
they don't have any fawns.
right.
Sorry.
'Cause, I mean, I guess what I do is I sit there and I think about, we started this process a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 3 years, how many deer have been born into the municipality that perhaps going a different direction could have not been born in the municipality? So I guess that's where, I mean, we're going to be starting, when we start in 2018, and we're not going to see the effect till 2019, we're going to be already 3 years behind where we could have been if we'd done something different. So, and again, I know that Councillor Kirby has also talked about this, as Councillor Murdoch has
I'm
said.
just going to ask you to focus on questions for Mr. Huckster, and then all this stuff can come out during our discussions. Any more questions, Mr. Huckster? Okay, anyone have any more questions, Mr. Huckster? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Murdoch.
Thank you. Just a real quick question. Sorry, for my clarification, I'm looking at the budget here. I actually, made an assumption, because the only thing I could read of actually doing the inoculation was the production trials, but that is not the inoculation itself. That's just the vaccine production trials?
That's the testing of the vaccine to make sure it's effective.
Okay, so that where in this $51,500 is there actually inoculating the deer, the time and the equipment and so forth to actually do the inoculation?
We'll have the equipment, and we'll also have the graduate students from UVic to assist us in this. The only cost that would come to us with the cost of if we have to capture the deer, would be to have the cost of a veterinarian to accompany us.
Okay, so
And that's an important factor in this as well. Currently, in order to inoculate a deer with this vaccine, you have to actually capture the animal and tag it. That's a Health Canada rule because you're dosing with it. If the research that we do tells us that these does don't go past a 300-meter range, we can apply to Health Canada for an exemption, whereby we don't have to actually capture the deer. We can then just go through the community and just dart deer with a vaccine, a long-term efficiency vaccine, and that would be truly effective. If you're simply culling the deer and getting perhaps 25 per year, that could leave another 75 does that'll be having 2 or 3 fawns every year. Whereas the vaccine, it stops the fawns from being born, which means there's less fawns, more adult does, and less babies in the coming years.
I'm just going to ask the question maybe a little more clearly. So if that work is being done, is that money coming out of the 2017 budget that we approved? We're asking for money to do the work. We
The
put
product
money in-
development work, you mean?
No, to do the actual inoculation work, right? You're saying that the plan is to do the inoculation work in 2018. This is the 2018 budget here. I'm looking at the line of items of all the things we're going to accomplish and the money asked for. There's not a single line item in here to actually, in the budget, apply to actually doing the inoculation. So I guess my question is, where's the money coming from to do that work? You have equipment, but you still have to have veterinarians and students and people who know how to fire a rifle or a dart gun and so forth. So where's that funding coming in?
Well, there is really no need for extra funding for that because we'll have the dart, we'll have the rifles, we'll have graduate students that are volunteering to do this because they've done it with bears, they've done it with elk, but they've never done it with black-tailed deer. So this adds to their resume. They can write up papers on this. So they're eager and anxious to do it. We're actually getting volunteers to do it.
Okay, so then I guess.
So the costs are negligible.
So what's the cost per inoculation then? I mean, there's cost broken into development, but once this is all said and done, any sense of what the cost per inoculation actually is then for us going forward? Assuming that every year or two we go around and shoot a bunch more deer of them just to make sure that we keep the population down?
We couldn't really give you a cost per population because we don't know what the actual numbers are and how many does that we would do. The more there are, the cheaper it is. Economies of scale. As well, if we're able to just do darting rather than capturing darting through a Health Canada exemption, that lowers the cost even more.
Okay, thank you. I'm always nervous when people say we can cover all the costs, but we don't know what the costs are.
Yes, it really is negligible. Other than the cost of the $100 for each inoculation of the drug, which is accounted for in the budget, any other additional costs, we have everything we need.
Okay. It's assuming if there's no, through you, Chair, that there's no capturing required and so forth in this process. It's just a DART model.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Just remain there for a minute, Mr. Huckster, because I have a double-barrel question. Firstly for Mr. Jones, and then following up for you. Mr. Jones, if council doesn't approve this tonight, I assume that the UWSS cannot apply in their own directly to the ministry, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. If council doesn't approve this tonight, which means then the $40,000 essentially is lost, what will become of the program?
The program would die.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, Councillor, what did you?
I was
Councillor
just
Croft?
ready. I was ready to make a motion, but
Councillor
go ahead.
Croft,
I just had one question regarding the long-term vaccine, and that is, what is the average lifespan of a black-tailed deer?
About 10 years.
Okay.
8 to 10 years.
Thank you.
and when do they become fertile bearing, so they can bear fawns, you know? How many years?
Shortly after their first year,
Oh my gosh.
after the first birthday. And it's also worth noting that if you reduce the numbers too quickly, there's a thing called reproductive rebound. So if you drop the population really fast, as they did with the state and game department in New Jersey, the younger does, instead of having one, will have 2 fawns, and triplet births are much more common. They targeted just does in a portion of the state, New Jersey, and killed off a lot of does, and within 3 years' time, the number had come back and actually increased.
Okay.
So stabilization is the first, and then reduction is secondary.
Thank you. Now, no other questions? Councillor Kirby, please.
I would move the recommendation.
Seconded?
Moved and seconded. Discussion.
Can I make a brief comment?
You sure can. You're the mover. Go ahead, please.
I just wanted to reaffirm my comments that I've made over the last 3 years, 4 years, 6 years, I guess, whatever, since last term, about the downloading onto local governments by the province and the federal government with the Health Canada expectation. I think there's a $1,000 fee for some permit or another, and so there's absolutely no contribution from the federal government on this. And the provincial government, while contributing and following on, the former government's heels with this $1,000 or $100,000 annual grant process, while it does support communities in dealing with this issue, it's frustrating that it's still a local government issue when we're talking about biologists and animal care certificates and research and public education, which they have already acknowledged is their area of expertise. They could be doing this for the entire province, and here we are doing this for 18,000 people at great expense and consuming a huge part of our staff time and our agendas in managing this issue. I'm still very frustrated. I appreciate your efforts and the diligence that you have shown in meeting all of these requirements and the regulations that have been increasingly more challenging from what I hear tonight. And I appreciate that you're holding that high standard and making sure that this is done well, and so that other communities may benefit from our investment. Because I do believe this will be a model that will be carried forward elsewhere. But again, it's extremely frustrating that it's coming down to Oak Bay investing in not just a local issue, but a regional issue, a provincial issue, and actually an international issue, as we've heard that this is a major issue as well in other large urban centers on the East Coast. So yeah, I just had to vent. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for that venting. Councillor Braithwaite, please.
I won't vent so much, but I would agree with absolutely everything that Councillor Kirby has said. I truly appreciate the work that your organization has put into this. However, I believe that I have to vote against it on that principle. I think it's not going to get, I think that my colleagues will vote it through, but I think that at least one of us has to show, to take a stand and say, yes, the province has to take care of this. It shouldn't be on the backs of our municipality. So although I appreciate the work that you're doing, I do have to voice my opinion and vote against it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. No further hands for discussion. Councillor Murdoch, please.
Yeah, I'm actually going to make a motion, to just an amendment motion to the motion that's here. But I want to just thank UWSS for all the work that's been done. It's good.
Can you make the motion, please? Is it to thank them?
No, it's not to thank them.
So if you want to make the amending motion, that would be helpful.
My further motion, and so the motion that was made here as recommended for asking for the funding substantively, which words substantively in the form of the program prepared. And the second portion, that council requested the provincial government additional funding to wholly fund the academic research component of the program prepared by the Urban Wildlife Stewardship Society. As such, research will directly benefit the province in developing deer management options in Oak Bay. So that would be my...
Could you read that out again, please, so we make sure staff have that?
I shall see the last part.
Make
So
sure
that
it's in
council request of the provincial government additional funding to wholly fund the academic research component of the program prepared by the Urban Wildlife Stewardship Society. As such, research will directly benefit the province in developing deer management options. Okay.
So staff have that? That's an amendment, so that's an addition to the current. It doesn't run contrary to the current wording of the motion, so it's in order. And now that's moved. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that for discussion.
Moved and seconded. Now it's open for discussion on the amendment to add the words that have been read in by Councillor Murdoch. Thank you. Go ahead. Did you want to start, Councillor Murdoch, since you made the amending motion?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day here, my primary concern is to get Oak Bay to a stabilized and reduced deer population as effectively and efficiently and as humanely and everything else as possible. I think that's shared by everybody in the community, frankly. I'm not entirely convinced that culling is not an option, but I fully support the fact that we as a council have decided to go down this path and we're doing it, so let's do it as well as we can. But I do think that there is considerable and reasonable concern about the amount of money being spent by this municipality on something, on a level of base level research and academic study that is required by the province, but is not benefiting to the province. Because frankly, we could run around now if we're allowed and shoot a bunch of deer full of contraceptives, and we could measure the number of deer picked up by Public Works every year as a gross measure of how effective it is. And that would be good enough as a community. That's really all we really need to measure whether or not it's effective. It's not, but there is a benefit to having more rigorous pieces of this, and certainly to measure whether this is an effective tool or not, to justify that to the province. It's necessary, and I get that. I have a very hard time with us funding this portion of it, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kirby, please, on to the amendment.
I just wanted to clarify, so this would be a letter that we would send separately because I'm concerned that this might impact our application for the grant.
I think the way that it's worded, it would be a separate letter, presumably with a copy of the wording of the motion. It could either be under the signature of the Director of Corporate Services or mine. I'll leave that to staff. So it would be a separate letter. It wouldn't be an addendum to the application. I don't think that was the intention of the motion.
That was my intent, was just a separate letter supported by council.
I think we caught that. Yep.
So if I could be assured that the letter might be slightly delayed in its submission.
Sequenced, I think it's called.
Sequenced, yes.
Yes. It'll be appropriately sequenced.
I wouldn't want to impact our chances at receiving the funding that does exist by offending anyone.
Okay. You don't want to bite the hand that may feed you. Okay. No other discussions on the amendment. So this is just on the amendment to add the words that have been read in. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Now on the main motion, any further discussion? The amended motion, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Councillor Braithwaite's opposed. Thank you. It passes. And we move on. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the work that you're doing. And continued good luck. All right, thank you. We move on to item number 7. That's the Regional District Sewage Cost Recovery at Allocation Changes. There was a motion last time at Council, referred to by Mr. Mears. This is being brought back by me as reconsideration. That's a power under the the provincial legislation. Not only it's a discretion of the mayor, but also on regional chairs. It's used in a variety of circumstances. I deemed in this case that it was worthy of being brought back, because about a week after, or less than a week after, the motion was passed, we were written to by staff saying it could not be done as the motion was intended in 2018, because the process at the CRD to change from where we're at, 100% to a 70-30 split, would require a number of steps which would not be able to be done in time for the 2018 water and sewer rates. My understanding of the process that would be required to make those changes at the CRD was it would have to go to a committee. The committee then would report to the board, and the board would make the decision. And that probably is at least a 2-month process, I would think, maybe 3 months, given the Christmas holidays. So under those circumstances, I brought it back. Also, the circumstance that one councillor connected with me and contacted me and really wanted a sober second thought, kind of like us acting as our own senators. So for that reason, it's back on our agenda for reconsideration. So we're essentially at the point where the motion has been made and seconded, but it's quite clear that it cannot go forward without some kind of additional change to it, because it cannot go through the CRD in time to meet the deadline of the motion, which was for the 2018 rates. It could certainly go to the CRD well in time for changes in 2019, but that was not the intention of the motion. So we have a staff report, which we didn't have last time. It's signed by our Director of Financial Services, who yesterday left for the Far East, a 3-week holiday, and left Mr. Jones holding the fort on this particular issue. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to start to see if there are questions of our staff in regards to the particular report, or any other issues that arise in regards to the cost allocation. So, are there questions on the report? Okay, I don't see a hand going up right away. I have a question. One of the things that wasn't clear last time, certainly in my mind, and may not be clarified completely by this report, Mr. Jones, is the amount of money that will be taken off the utility bill and placed on the taxes, and then what impact that might have. So let's start with, I understand that there's 5,300 single-family dwellings that are currently on the utility bill method at about $75 per household. And correct me if I'm wrong, that would just be about $400,000 that we would add to our tax bill as a result of the changing the individual homes from utility to taxes, correct? Whoops.
Oh, yeah, 5,300 by 75, that's about
It's just
397,000. Yeah.
Okay, so the one question though I had was, that doesn't incorporate apartments, because they would also be moving from utility to tax, or for that matter, condominiums here, or co-ops that would similarly be moving from the utility to taxes. Do you know the impact, first of all, on the taxation rolls? How much would be transferred to taxes for those, I guess, 3, rentals, co-ops, and condominiums?
Your Worship, anyone that pays the sewer utility will get a bill, so everyone's going to be impacted. How this, the calculation staff did was to take the averaged assessed value of property in Oak Bay, which is $1.178 million, And if water consumption were to remain at the rate the previous year, a property of that value would see an increase in their tax bill of $75 and a decrease in their utility bill roughly the same. As the value of properties increase, and because 30% would be charged on taxes, the higher value properties, again, if water consumption remains constant, would pay more than the $75, and lower valued properties would pay less. Again, that would be if water consumption remained constant.
Okay, so I just want to stay for a minute on those three types of buildings. So if there was an apartment building that was worth let's say 1.2 million, or is that the average? Okay, then they would also see the same shift of $75.
Correct, if the water consumption was the same, yes.
That's right, but the water consumption of multifamily rental of maybe 12 or 24 units would be, I would assume, different than a single family. So do we know how much one would go down and the other would go up for apartments?
No, Your Worship. We didn't do calculations on all of those. What we did was the average, and we can tell you if you're above the average assessed value, your taxes are going to go up more than 75. If you're less, they'll go up less than 75.
Okay, so the same can be said, I take it, for co-ops and condominiums.
Yes.
All right. Do we know the impact on rentals? In other words, if someone's paying rent, how, as a renter, how might this change impact individual renters in multifamily rental buildings?
Your Worship, that would depend on the rental agreement that the party had. In some rental agreements, you pay for the utilities directly as the renter. Other times, those utilities may be included in the rent amount. But ultimately, there is someone paying that utility. And so, again, depending on the value of the property, it will be more than $75 or less than $75.
And what about for condominiums and co-ops? Is that, they're not paying rent, but do you know how that gets distributed, how that, the responsibility on a utility bill versus taxes, how that works?
Again, it would depend on the nature of the rental agreement and the terms of the cooperative agreement.
Okay, so I take it there's been no analysis of impact on an individual basis.
We haven't, not other than doing the,
Okay.
we know the average is 75 and it will be higher or lower. I mean, the number of combinations is almost infinite when you consider it. This is what people will be paying will be 30% on their taxes plus a value for the consumption. So very difficult to do a really an analysis that we could provide something to everybody.
Okay, and then certainly from what I understand then, the higher valued homes their taxes would go up appreciably more if they have above average value of their homes, correct?
Yes, relatively, again, but remember there's 70% of the value would still be a result of water consumption.
And then the values of homes below the average, presumably they would bear less tax burden.
Correct.
Okay. Now, do we know what's the interplay between a high valued home and a high water user will change?
Well, it depends. It's relative. So if a property increased its water consumption, then they would pay more because 70% of the charge is related to consumption. If their consumption remained constant, then if it's higher than the average, they would pay more than the 75, but I can't tell you exact numbers.
All right, so presumably also low volume users might end up paying more in taxes when you make that shift. Is that also possible?
Well,
or have I got that backwards?
It's very difficult to say, Your Worship, because this is dependent on consumption and assessed value. So it's, I can tell you if you have a higher than averaged assessed value and your water consumption is higher this year than last, then you're going to pay more in taxes, and you're going to pay more because your water consumption's increased.
Okay, so double whammy. So the final part was to do with the impact on the overall taxes. It's at least 400,000 we're shifting, and it sounds like more because we don't know the values of condos, apartments, and co-ops. So it's a minimum 400,000. What does that equate to in terms of a percentage increase in taxes?
Roughly a little less than 2.
Okay. All right. Those are all my questions for now. I might, after hearing other questions, have more questions. Just that in my mind, there's a lot of questions. Any questions from Okay, no other questions. I'm going to ask you this other thing, and that is, would it be possible to give us a matrix of information that would show for high-valued properties, so above average, the impact on a high water user, medium or average water user, and low water users, and then do that for 3 categories of assessed values, for ones that are substantially above, ones that are average, and ones that are below average?
Your Worship, yes, we could do that.
Okay.
If you were to tell us what assessed values you wanted us to use and what levels of water consumption, because the possibilities are
Sure.
infinite.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. So, no other questions? Okay. Now it's open for discussion. Yeah, question? Yeah, let's deal with questions first.
I think I have a question. I'm just want to clarify something through you, Chair. Right now, the percentage of, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, but the percentage of tax increase, or the percentage that we pay for our utilities, which doesn't show up on our tax bill, is what amount? If that amount was fully on our tax bill, what would that be? Do you know?
Your Worship, no, I don't. And part of the challenge is that some of the costs from the CRD for that function are included in their broader, what they call the requisition. So the costs that we're actually talking about now are what are referred to as post-2006 costs for sewer. So there are other costs, and those are not broken down on the requisition that we receive.
So how would we calculate that? How would we separate? Is it possible?
Your Worship, this refers specifically to the post-2006.
Okay.
So we do have those numbers.
You have those numbers, okay. Sorry, Councillor Braithwaite, does that help, or? Fuss. As just like deer, this is very complicated. Councillor Murdoch, please.
Thank you, Chair. And maybe a good procedure here would be to treat this more like it's a regular reconsideration motion, and maybe lay out the case for reconsidering the decision last time. I guess your question sparked me to one question. This change I made in 2010, which incrementally increased it from what the proposal on the table is, the 70-30 split, to a 100-30 split. Can you, and this was, I think, supported by the mayor, who was a councillor at that time, can you tell us what detailed reports on the breakout for condos and rentals and co-ops and matrices for every value of house and water consumption was done at that time for when the decision was made? Was there any such process gone through?
Sorry, you're looking at me?
So I should ask the mayor. You probably recall the process better. Since the request here is from you.
7 years ago. I don't remember. I think it was, I don't know if those figures were before us, to tell you the honest truth, as to whether or not shifting it from one side to the other was something that was in the report. So
I don't remember. I don't recall that.
but I don't recall one way or another. That was 7 years ago a report, so I can't say. But maybe if there's anyone who's done it recently, if there are communities that have shifted it recently from one side to the other or backward or whatever that you can speak to?
Your Worship, I don't believe there are.
Okay. No more questions? All right. Thank you. Now, discussion?
I guess for this, the way this reconsideration process works, as opposed to most, is that I guess I'm the mover of the motion, and it's now live again. We're missing a couple of councillors that voted for it last time, but it's back here before us again. I said this last time, and it's iterated in the staff report. It's a philosophical decision by council. We want to do it one way, or don't want to do it the other way. It's not right or wrong. It can be done either way. It's been done 100% on taxes or on water consumption for a few years. And my argument last time, and it seemed to win the way, was that it made sense for us to try going back to the original system of doing it for a couple of reasons. Some of them are more esoteric than others, but at the end of the day, the fact that people could defer what is a substantially growing portion of household costs because it's on the taxes sort of seemed to win the day. And the other argument I made, and I think it was debated at the time about whether or not it'd be more or less visible being on the taxes versus being on the water bills. I think the fact that you raise here that this was at least 30% of the water bill or of the sewage costs is around $400,000. That cost went up last year 30%. So our taxes went up 2.9%. We all knew that, and we debated it, and we discussed it, and it was very visible. Our water bills went up an equivalent amount, as if we added another 2% onto our taxes quietly, silently, without anybody even being aware of the fact. So I think answering the question, going through this process, it tells me that this is a more visible process. And frankly, the argument made that this has to come back because there was a letter written by staff saying that we couldn't do it this way isn't true. We actually have, in further looking at this, we have the motions can stand quite happily. We can implement it however we see fit. We can do it internally and just make a note on the taxes, or we can make a request of the service agreement change at the CRD. But the head of finances at the CRD has said pretty clearly they don't want to do that and probably won't support it. So because they don't want to get into this thing where they're managing these splits anymore, it's perfectly within our purview to do this and just split it on our taxes. And I think as a line item, it's visible and it's good. And the fact that our taxes went up 4.9% last year, not 2.9%, and nobody knew about half of it is wrong. And I think that the motion's back here, it's in front of us, nothing's changed in the intervening time. I don't think getting a matrix of comparisons is going to make any difference. It's a philosophical discussion. I'm fine with the motion the way it stands, and once it's done, the real question that's being asked of this report is, how do we want to implement that? And I'm quite happy to make a motion to that effect, but we have this primary motion in front of us at this time, and once that's through, then we can move on, and I can make I think it was a pretty simple suggestion in terms of how we actually go about implementing it.
Thank you. Any other points? Okay. My concern is moving a lot of money onto the taxes, and that might impair our ability to deal with infrastructure. The motion as it stood could not be implemented without another motion. That's why it came back for reconsideration. So and we don't know the impact on high value homes enough, I'm suggesting. So the issue of tax deferral does not apply to a lot of high-value homes. Any home, I believe it's 1.6 million and above, cannot defer their taxes. That's my understanding. So the people with a high-valued home, and just because it's accrued, are not in a situation that they can necessarily defer their taxes. So they may be hit with a double whammy. The double whammy is this, and I don't think we know enough about it. The double whammy is because their houses are high value, and they may have owned the house for 30, 40, 50 years. Their taxes are going to go up by comparison much more than an average price house. And two, they can't defer. So that's a double whammy that I don't think we're aware of, and I think that's something we need to reflect on. I don't think that we have the information to be able to make an informed decision, all right? So, any other points? Councillor Croft, please.
I actually did support the motion last week, but having thought about it over the last couple of weeks, I still think that the best way that we are doing it is the way we're doing it now. Philosophically, I don't see any advantage in breaking out the amount that is going towards sewage. We know that we're going to have to pay for the sewage plant. We have a way that pays for it. We charge water because we can measure water. Everything else is an estimate of a percentage of this or a percentage of that. We have the water that goes through. It's as fair and as transparent as any cost of services. The agreement has been in existence from 2011. It's worked quite well. It does not allocate on the value of property and treats single-family and multiple-family residential facilities the same. I think that it is equitable as opposed to one that now highlights a cost of a sewer service facility. And if I recall the discussions back in 2010, 2007 when we were changing these, it was based upon the amount of water that Oak Bay was putting into the system, which we are starting to correct because of our upland sewer separation project. And I think that this shifting the tax burden, shifting this burden from a quarterly payment of $25 a quarter or 33 times a year to $75 on the tax bill, which will increase every year, I think we're really hurting ourselves in increasing our taxes to pay towards infrastructure renewal within our own municipality. So I do not support the motion as we passed it last time, and I would like to see it stay as it was. So I'll actually be voting now against the motion.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Kirby, please.
When it was broken down at the last meeting, it seemed very simple. $75 off one bill and added to another, and that the transparency would be there either way, and that it wouldn't matter the argument that did sway me was that for those people suffering from financial issues, that they could defer their taxes and therefore defer that extra $75 a year, given that there are people on fixed incomes in very expensive old homes now that have rapidly climbed in value in the last 4 years. So that initially swayed me. Then, so to hear now that there's a variation and that it's not fairly distributed necessarily. I mean, I like the idea that those with higher, I liked the idea initially that those with higher valued homes would pay more. But then given that not all people are allowed to defer, that's new information to me. I didn't know that there was a maximum range for the value of the home at 1.6 million, which, I mean, to anyone living outside of Oak Bay might sound outrageous and silly. That, if you're living in a home that's $1.6 million, that of course you can afford your taxes. But in any of us that have door knocked throughout the municipality know that there are people in our community that are living in very high valued homes that are living on a very marginal income. And so that concerns me, that it's not a fair distribution. If it were just 75 and 75 and it's a transfer, honestly, I don't care. I think, you know, people pay as much attention to their water bill line items as they do their tax line items. Very little. And so I feel like we spend a lot of time talking about this, and we have spent, I think, at least 3 meetings this year talking about this issue. And, you know, it seemed like a silly debate, that it didn't really make that much difference to the bottom line for people. But if that is an unfair distribution, that bothers me. That's when we have to, I think this is the system we have. People expect a bill, and to change it and shift it and make it higher for some when they aren't anticipating that is worrisome to me. I also am concerned about the idea of shifting $400,000 to our tax rolls for next year, and that so the budget next year, when we're debating, will become very difficult, knowing the history of this council and just about every other council, wanting to keep those numbers very low so that there's not a great jump in taxes. Well, if there's already $400,000 or a 2% increase, what room do we have for infrastructure renewal and the asset management plan? That is, I think, our top priority, or should be our top priority in the years to come, as we are in a great infrastructure deficit. And so if we are hamstrung with already 2% allocated before we even walk into the budget, that makes me uncomfortable, that we will be limited as to what we can achieve in our asset management renewal and infrastructure renewal.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Jones, I see your hand up.
Your Worship, just a point of information. I think from staff's perspective, we would like to look into the issue around deferral, because we don't believe there's a limit on the value of your home. There is a $1.6 million limit for your ability to claim your homeowner grant.
Oh, maybe that's it.
So I don't think
the deferral?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I don't think that applies.
That's an important piece of information. So the other thing is too, and this is to the mover, when we have these significant votes, particularly in this kind of case where we know other councillors where they've stood, we can also wait till we have a full council to decide. We have had a tradition of that on major issues. So that's also a possibility. And I know Councillor Ney will be here next week. I don't know when Councillor, and we could have a special meeting next week if we wanted to. And I don't know about Councillor Zelka, however. He hasn't been in touch recently, so I don't know when he's coming back. So that's also a possibility. Should you want to refer this to the next council meeting, or I guess essentially table it till next council meeting? Yes, Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to actually make the point that it's not 1.6 million for deferring of taxes. That's for your homeowner grant. You can defer your taxes at whatever value your house is. So I think that does make a difference. I think that it's more accurate to do it the way that we have set out, and I'm astounded that we passed this as 6-1. Last meeting, and now all of a sudden we're discussing it again because someone has felt that it's needed to be discussed again. I think I really truly believe that this is a much more accurate way to look at our tax bill, and I think on a point that Councillor Murdoch made, and which was where I was trying to go before, was that the increase for the utility bill and the tax bill, or the sewer bill, adds 2% at minimum onto our tax bill. So why not reflect that more accurately? And I think that, to me, we don't know the difference that it's going to make on somebody's bill, as far as if I have a $2 million house and right now I'm paying $200 every quarter for my water bill, my water sewer bill, is that going to just make a difference of $200 on my tax bill? Is that going to add $200 onto my tax bill if we do it this way? We don't know that. I'm assuming that it's going to be pretty close. The beautiful thing about council is we can make a 6-to-1 decision and have it come back. We can also, if this passes and moves forward right now, we can look at it for a year, see what happens in a year. At least we've tried it to see if it's more accurate. And if it doesn't suit us, we can then make the decision to move it back the way it was. So to me, it's worth moving ahead and trying it for 1 year to see what it's like.
Thank you. So, are we ready for the vote? Yep. Sorry. I have Councillor Murdoch and Councillor Kirby, please.
Well, I think it's important to address the two big pieces. One, yeah, it is deferrable, so that is a huge portion. If you have a large property with lots of water use and you're a high value property, you get to defer that large amount of money, whether it goes from a large water bill to a large tax bill. I have a real issue with the unfair distribution. That is the model that we have for taxes. The more valuable the house, the more you pay. And most of the capital projects that we pay for are on taxes. This is just, we have they're built over 100 years, they're maintained over 100 years, and they're paid for out of taxes on an ongoing basis. That's how we pay for most of our capital projects. It's not unfair to include 30% of this capital cost onto that. I just don't think that's the right term. This is a philosophical, I think we spent too much time on this already. I don't want to defer it. It's a philosophical decision about whether or not it's worth trying or not. I'm fine with that. I do really think that I guess if I had to describe myself, I'm more like a radical centrist. I don't care if taxes have to stay low or have to go high. I want what we spend on taxes to be as clear to the people paying them as possible. And it fundamentally, the fact that our taxes went up 4.9% last year and not 2.9%, because that 2% came onto the water bill last year. I think having more visibility on this is inherently a good thing. If it's 1 year or 2 years and we say this is just not going to work for us, what does it matter? We have to be looking at this from the impact of the overall cost to the homeowner of how we're running our municipality. We have massive amounts of costs coming in terms of our infrastructure upgrades. None of those are being helped by hiding it more in the water bill or putting it over here. The more visibility we have on this, the more we're going to be forced into an honest conversation with each other and with the community, saying, these are big bills. These are $100, $200 million bills that we're not getting around. So if we're not looking at these eyes wide open, looking at the bare costs, we are not doing ourselves, and we're not doing 2% is nothing. $400,000 is nothing in the big piece of this picture. The fact that it's more visible and it might scare people, good. We're being honest. It's scary. We have to actually face this fact. I really have a hard time seeing how this is a major issue to move back. I mean, when I made the motion, I made it intentionally to be very conservative in the approach. I'm just like, nothing's radical here. We're going back to a system that we had 7 years ago in terms of the payment piece. It's just, we'll have a look at it. The difference has been that the sewage made up 4% in 2010, and now it's making up 50, 60, going up to 80% of the water bill. Is that a reasonable balance when that capital cost of sewage, which is a fixed cost, it's not utilization, is put so much on usage of water? So I'm fine with whatever council wants to do. I have a problem with the fact that this is being recalled, that obviously lots of conversations have happened individually, one-on-one, to bring it back here. I just think, just vote how you think is right. If you think that it's reasonable to try it, vote for this. If you don't, then don't. I'm fine with that. It's a philosophical decision, but I brought it forward because I think that the deferment portion of this is important, and that having the scary discussion is important for us as a council as well.
Councillor Kirby, please.
My only other concern is about the water usage, and that if suddenly people see their bills drop, are they going to be disincentivized to conserve water? If people suddenly see themselves, this doesn't cost very much, will they suddenly start to use more water? And I mean, we have benefited from the regional programs we've seen a massive reduction in water usage over the last decade. I think people are keenly aware of their water usage now, and as David Suzuki says, you should be jumping in and out of the shower. Like, it really, it's that bad. And yes, we have an excellent water reserve, but our reservoir is full most of the year, and we're in good shape. But we're the only place on the island that's in good shape. And there's just there's those conservation issues that still concern me.
Okay.
I can just, may I?
Well, I was just going to respond to that, but if you want to, you can.
I can assuage your fear. The CRD portion of the sewage is going up another 30% this year. So the portion that we're moving on to taxes is going up again. So the people probably won't see a water bill drop at all. It'll probably go up slightly.
Okay. But I'm going to take you up on that point, because there were two reasons why we initially 7 years ago moved that final step to put everything on the utility bill. One reason was the water conservation issue, because that created a greater incentive, and not a huge incentive, but it was some incentive that people had to conserve water, because by conserving water, they would reduce their bill. Second of all, it also allowed people to have the control of the water. In other words, if they choose to reduce their utility bill, they have that ability. You don't have that with the taxes on there. All right, I think we're ready for the question. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is defeated. Thank you. Thank you. Now, move on to number 8, please. Heritage Conservation Area Working Group Work Plan. We have a report from the Director of Corporate Services here, and we've got a work plan attached to it, and it's before us. As we can see there, the work plan talks about various steps. I see there's some people from the HCA, that the working group has suggested a variety of steps in moving ahead, and we have that. I think it's in Appendix A. Is that correct, Mr. Jones? Is that the work plan?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, and you can see there it's handwritten on the top of Appendix A, Attachment A. So there we have the step. And what we're being asked today is to approve this work plan. All right, so the recommendation is that the work plan attached as A, dated B, approved, and that'll allow the work to commence and the ball to start rolling. All right, does anyone wish to make a motion?
Move approval.
Moved. Seconded. Discussion? No discussion? Yes, go ahead,
I
please.
would just like to say thank you for coming with such a concise, readable scope for your working group. Thank you.
Yeah, it bodes well for the road ahead. Good, simple writing is a great way to achieve the objectives, and I want to thank the working group and Councillor Murdoch for bringing this forward. This is going to be a model for much of Oak Bay, and I think it will be of great benefit not only to the area that we're talking about, but to the wider community. We know there's quite a number of these HCAs dotted throughout Victoria, and appear to have had some success. All right, so I'm ready for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you very much, and thanks to the working group. I know some of the members are here, I see. Thank you very much for that. And I wish you all the best. And we'll see frequent report backs from the working group through Councillor Murdoch, and I appreciate the efforts that you've made to date, and we look forward to the efforts you'll make in the future. Thank you very much. Number 9, that is the Building and Planning Department Monthly Report of Active Plan Land Use Applications. And we have here multi-page, 15 pages of things that are happening, Ms. Jensen, in your neck of the woods. Obviously very busy. Is there something you want to comment or draw to our attention through this long list of information and facts?
I would just suggest that we're not necessarily seeing a drop in applications. They continue to increase every month. In this particular month, we've seen an additional 3 land use applications for the month of October and an additional 10 building permit applications.
Thank you very much, Ms. Johnson. Any questions on the report?
Move receipt.
Okay, moved
Second.
and seconded. Questions or comments? Councillor Murdoch, please.
Yeah, just more of a broad question on this one. It's good to get a sense of what's happening. My question is through you to, I guess, Ms. Jensen. The $500 cutoff for building permits, I know that can be kind of, people don't often come forward for $500 building permits. Is that, has that been around? It's been there as long as I can remember. How long has that been in place?
Yeah, that clause has been in the building bylaw since it was adopted in 2004. It makes reference to where a value of a project does not exceed $500 and there are no health and safety concerns.
Okay, that's fair enough. It just occurred to me looking at the sheer number of permits and so forth. Most of them appear to be well above the $500 limit, but it's one of those things that we may want to consider over time. Just things have to be seen to be reasonable, to be for reasonable people to follow them. And if it costs you, to get a building permit to paint a room at some point, which is almost what we're getting to at $500, that may be getting a little thick. But no, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and certainly appreciate the report.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm not going to. Yes, go ahead, please, Councillor Kirby.
I just was reflecting on information that I heard this week that there were 15,000 construction workers in the area, in the CRD right at this time, and there are generally 13,000, and that there were hundreds of vacant positions available for construction workers. And I'm just wondering if we have seen any need for more stringent oversight on construction sites through the building department, whether that's become a burden because there are less skilled people suddenly taking up tools and becoming construction workers to fill that demand.
Who's able to speak to that complicated
without sort of
question?
having some conversation with our building inspectors, I don't know that we can make a comment for council tonight.
Okay.
Okay, it's just a query for future reference. Maybe just I just am concerned that this is again an issue where the region is facing intense growth and a real demand, obviously in a housing crisis, for increased housing, and some huge projects going on downtown which are stealing away skilled workers. And just that might become an issue for our staff to be enforcing an oversight of the bylaw and the regulations, health and safety regulations, given that they've got a huge number of applications on their plate already, and there's a huge number of sites for them to visit every day. It just worries me that we might end up 10 years from now or 20 years from now seeing consequences of a building boom, much like the leaky condo issue or something like that, where there was a massive boom and just the strain on the system could be too much. Anyways.
Thank you very much. Any other comments, questions? This is a motion to receive. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. We have number 10, minutes of the Oak Bay Advisory Design Panel.
Seconded.
Okay, moved and seconded. Discussion. This is to receive. Thank you very much. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Correspondence that
Move receipt.
Move receipt of that piece of correspondence. Seconded. Is there 2 on there? Because I'm not sure I updated my.
Yes, there's 2.
Yeah, mine didn't get up. My electronic version didn't get updated. So I'm just going to try to do that now. Apologize for the step. It still doesn't appear. Okay. I know I can fix that. I think I have to delete it, Ms. Jones, and then reboot it.
Your Worship, if it's of assistance, the additional piece of correspondence is with respect to the development variance permit proposal for 1984 Crescent Road. It is a single piece of correspondence from Mr. Bruce McRae, and it is in support of the proposed application.
That's helpful. So it's the one that was on there and then the additional one to receive. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. New business. Any new business? report on the Capital Regional District. The one huge piece of information is, which was released recently after the Wednesday meeting, was the CRD board approves or advances the Transportation Service Establishment Bylaw. So this is a bylaw that's meant to advance the Service Establishment Bylaw for approval, and the service will focus on things like transportation policy, plan surveys and studies, management of designated regional trails, data collection for transportation modeling, and it essentially will move to create a transportation authority which will coordinate the major transportation issues. That's into the future. This is the first step, but it's a very important step. And the board still has to determine whether or not the method of approval for the service bylaw should be either region-wide, and if it is done regional-wide, that it'll apply to all communities, or individual communities can be asked whether or not they want to opt in or opt out, or there could be a referendum. So there's different ways to approve this, but certainly perhaps the worst way would be allowing communities to opt out of what is essentially a critical issue for the future and the economic future and environmental future of our community. So it is something that will come back to the board. Board will make a decision as to which of the approval methods it decides on. So that's my report on that. That's the big item that came out of that meeting. Okay. Any other? So other verbal reports. Yes, go ahead, please, Councillor Croft.
Through you, Mayor. I want to draw people's attention to the Smart South Island Symposium. Go online at Smart South Island and sign up for a symposium. There's about $10 million available for Smart Cities program through the federal government, and the South Island Prosperity Project is planning to make an application. This takes place at the convention center, so I would encourage people to join up and go online to register for it. It's November 25th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And the facilitator is Charles Montgomery, the author of Happy City. And we also have a keynote address by a gentleman from Portugal. He's the Vice President of Global Future Cities.
Thank you very much. Other verbal reports? Okay, I have two. It relates to buses. Earlier last week, yes, I'm trying to get my week straight, last Monday, and this had to do with the bus that's servicing Harling Point, and as part of the bus review there was a suggestion that the bus not go into Harling Point anymore. The neighbors raised a concern. I think they first raised a concern with Councillor Murdoch. Then I was asked to attend a meeting of neighbors. That led to a meeting with Susan Bryce, the chair of the Victoria Transportation Commission, Transit Commission, I think is the correct word, and two neighbors and two staff. That meeting resulted in a very positive outcome. That service into Harling Point would continue. And then one of the neighbors put a very nice Facebook post thanking the BC Transit and the efforts that were made on their behalf by staff, Ms. Bryce and myself. So that's part of it. Now, given that success, I took the opportunity to raise what I think can be called a hoary old issue, H-O-A-R-Y, which has been around for quite some time, and that's the bus going through the uplands. Over the years, we've heard a lot about the concerns of upland residents, about a large bus transiting through their community, generally with no people on it. Either no people going to the terminus, which is someplace down near Cadborough Bay, or no people on it coming out of that terminus and going back downtown. They received numerous. I have received numerous letters. I then contacted the neighbor, one of the neighbors who was leading that concern, and he's now working with the staff at BC Transit with some solutions. We had looked at solutions before, but nothing had ever been done by BC Transit. So it really is to one of the discussed solutions over the years was putting a right-sized bus on there. So we know, and certainly in Fairfield, there are smaller buses that use the local streets. Or secondly, taking some of these stops and putting them onto Cadboro Bay. So that issue is proceeding. BC Transit Victoria area is very much open to reviews of various routes in various areas, and they have been very open to the suggestion that they review that Uplands bus issue again. So that's very good news, for which I'm grateful to BC Transit, and I will report back as that issue evolves. All right, any other verbal reports? Not sure, Councillor Kirby, about that?
No, just now I'm pondering the announcement about the bus, that's all. That's
okay.
I know that's a very busy route.
Well, it is on some days, and that was the point that had been made earlier about BC Transit. On the peak hours, a big bus is needed. That seems to be quite clear. And I think the neighbors, at least that I spoke to over the years, accepted that. But on most of the time, it's not peak. Most of the time, small buses could handle the load. But that's something, again, I think I certainly would commend BC Transit for keeping an open mind and reviewing that as an issue. All right, thank you very much. No other business. We're going to resolutions. 2677 Lincoln. Now, these are all very similar applications. If you just give me a minute, I'll turn to my hard copy. These all have to do with issuing development variance permits. All four of the applications we're about to consider have been through our advisory board, and as well as the committee of the whole, us sitting here in council as a group. Public notices have been sent out, and people have an opportunity to come back and give their opinion either in writing or showing up today. So what I'm going to call, as I go through each one, I will ask for a motion. Following that, if there's any questions, I will invite the public, if anyone wishes to come forward to speak to the issue, and then make sure you indicate who you are, what your community is, and again, like earlier, print your name and your municipality on that slip. So we're at 2677 Lincoln. So a motion, please.
Motion to variance development permit 2677 Lincoln.
Second.
Thank you very much. Any questions, first of all, by council? No questions. Does any member of the public wish to address us on this issue? Seeing none, discussion at council, please. Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Development variance permit application for 2042 Carnarvon. A motion, please.
Move development variance permit 2042 Carnarvon Street.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any questions of, is the applicant here for that one? I should have asked if the applicant was here for the other one. My apologies. I skipped that. You were here? Sorry. So any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, I invite members of the public to come forward and address us on this issue. Seeing none, I invite discussion at council. Seeing none, I call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Thanks to the applicants and all the best with that. 1743 Armstrong Avenue. Is the applicant here? Hello? Now, could we have a motion, please?
Move development variance permit 2042 Carnarvon Street.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any questions of the applicant?
Apologies, Your Worship. I just wanted to clarify that we were in fact moving 1743 Armstrong Avenue, development variance permit number DVP 00071.
Oh, sorry.
Carnarvon.
I'm sorry.
1743. Oh, I see. I wasn't listening. Sorry, I normally listen to you, Councillor Croft, but this time I kind of zoned out. So
Yeah, me too, obviously.
it's to do with the DVP on Armstrong. Thank you very much for that catch, Ms.
Okay.
Jones.
Okay, motion, development
Yep.
variance permit 2042,
Nope.
Armstrong.
1743 Armstrong.
Oh, sim-
Good. It's getting on that time. Okay, I think we have the
Second.
motion.
Second.
We all know what it is. It's been moved and seconded. Now, no questions for the applicant or staff? All right. I'm going to see if there's any speakers that wish to address us on this. Seeing none, bring it back to council. Any comments, discussions? All in favor? Opposed, not opposed. And the last one is at 1984 Crescent Road. That was the addition of the correspondence. Could I have a motion in relation to 1984 Crescent Road, please?
Move development variance permit for 1984 Crescent Road.
Second.
Good, we got the right address, we got the right motion. As the applicant is here, I think I saw them come in, yes, hi. And any questions for the applicant or the applicants? I think it's, the designer is here also, I think. You on this one, Mr. Collins? Yeah. Okay, and no questions? Any member of the public wish to address us on this? Seeing none, I bring it back to council for discussion. Any discussion? Yes, go ahead, please.
I'm just going to, just to reiterate, I'm going to be voting against this for the same reasons as I did when it was at Committee of the Whole. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other points? No other points? I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Braithwaite opposed. It passes. Thank you very much. And all moved adjourned. And all the best to all the applicants with your projects. And I hope they all go well. Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you very much. And we adjourn. Thank you. See you all next week.